Hello and welcome into this initial edition of the Aussie Cricket Show with me, Andrew McLean, and Rob Findley. And we're going to be delving into all aspects of Australian cricket in the week that was and what might happen in the future. But firstly, welcome, Rob. This is the first show we've done together. I mean, we've probably had other situations in the past unrelated to cricket, but isn't it great to be talking cricket?
It is. No, it's great to be with you, Andy, and really appreciate it. And look, I could talk about this for hours, so looking forward to seeing where we go.
Hey, so just looking at this week. As you know, because we've talked offline about this. I have a massive problem with David Warner, but like it's almost like like a year ago he announced his retirement from Test cricket 1 year in advance. Um, and then obviously he got to the point where he was about to play his last match. Then he made his announcement that he was out of one-day cricket, and it's like, what's his next announcement? Is he going to resign from chess or tiddlywinks or whatever? And then he flies into the Big Bash in a helicopter. I mean, what planet is this guy living on?
I don't know. I think we've got sort of somewhat short memories and a very low high tolerance for some of the hijinks that he's involved in. Right? It's not that long ago that the sandpaper scandal was very much in the news and defined the culture of the team, and he was at the heart of that. And so he seems to be one for the grand statement, the grand entry. He seems to be one who needs to be the center of attention, and he's very divisive. And so this idea of landing on the SCG before a BBL match after his brother's own wedding, which he obviously attended then left early, it smacks of really someone who needs to play the dramatic card. And so I
Well,
don't know. What do you think?
exactly. I mean, if it's your brother's wedding, go to his wedding. Like if it was my brother's wedding or if it was your brother's wedding, you just say I'm not available that day. But I just get this feeling with Warner is that he just loves this kind of stardom thing. And I think back to there was a World Cup match. I think it was in Dharamshala. I can't remember exactly where it was, but
Mm-hmm.
all the fireworks were going off and everything. And I think it was Glenn Maxwell said at the time, it was massively distracting for the players. It was, it was hard to concentrate. And Warner came out with this line like, no, 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 this is brilliant. It's great for the game. And essentially what he was saying is that he was just he was trying to sort of build up this whole thing of, well, I've got a big India fan base, so I'm not. I want to build it up, and yeah, honestly, leaving your brother's wedding early is one thing,
Mm.
but to have this dramatic entry, it's just it's bordering on ridiculous. I that's my personal opinion anyway.
Yeah, I think he wants to fast forward the game to something that's extremely vibrant or exciting or over the top, and maybe that suits his style, his personality, his he gets his energy from that. He knows he can potentially make that a post game career of that kind of environment. Whether it suits his teammates doesn't seem to be necessarily on the top of his mind, as you said. So it's not for me, but maybe for others it is. But it smacks of where the game might go, to be honest. And I'm sure we'll touch on that over time. But it is something that is unique to him, yet you can see it becoming more common. So I
But
wonder what
but
will
but
happen
Rob,
there.
let me ask you a question though. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you use the word divisive, but
Mm.
I mean, Warner's from Sydney, right? And I remember when he made his initial T20 debut, and at that point he hadn't even played first class cricket at that time,
That's right.
and he
Yeah.
smacked that like 80 off 40 balls or something like that, and obviously he's developed a lot since then, but with the sandpaper issue and various things, I mean, is he actually liked in Australia?
Yes and no. I mean, social media is sort of you know warped as it isn't a bad barometer of what people think about him, right? You look at the comments, people love it or they hate it, and I guess when we need him to score 100, you're rooting for him, but it's sometimes the style and the before and after that gets on people's nerves a bit. So it's very much a divided audience. I think there's definitely a sort of a New South Wales versus everyone else perception that New South Wales players get a bit more leeway in making the test team. He's obviously been delivered results and runs over the years, but as a person, Australians get a bit grated, I suppose, when we see someone who starts to act a bit above themselves, and that's not always a great thing to be like that. But in Australia, you know where you stand when you get a bit above your skill, out front of your skis, I suppose, as they would say in the States.
Yeah, I mean, if I look at a guy like Pat Cummins, for example, and to be honest, as you know, I lived in England for a very, very long time, and I didn't really follow Australian cricket for a very, very long time. But
Mm.
I've looked at Pat Cummins this year, and I look at him as like a model actually now. He captains all formats. The way he deals with the press, he's just brilliant. But then I look at someone like Warner. Like what was it? Just over a year ago, or yeah, no, just under a year ago actually. I think he scored a century, was it, or a double century or whatever? No, I think it was a century at the Gabba.
Mm.
And he went off on this ridiculous kind of celebration at the end of it, pulled his hamstring, right?
Yeah, yeah,
That,
yeah.
and then like a couple of weeks later, Kane Williamson got 200 in Karachi, and I was there for the match. He barely even took his hat off. And I just think this Warner guy is just he doesn't really get it. And I don't follow the Australian press too much, but it's almost like there's a PR machine between him and his wife, and it's just I just think it's horrible, and I feel like that Warner has you know sold himself out basically, and I'm not sure everyone's going to back him after he leaves Australian cricket. Actually, I think some teams are going to say no, we don't want this guy part of our team. Um, I don't know. What's your opinion on that?
Well, I guess he's got still what a T20 career he wants to pursue, so that means he'll probably um, do play some of those circuits here and there. He'll put bums on seats and sell tickets and probably score runs, right? He's talked already and committed to Fox Sports in commentary, and I'm not
My
sure if I.
God, that will
Yeah,
that will turn me off straight away.
yeah, I'm not looking forward to that necessarily. It's not he's not someone that I listen to and feel like there's this warmth or connection yet with the audience. He'll no doubt have to tune that, but you're right. There's been this sort of massive PR initiative over the last few years that's involved his family that honestly has not used them, but that they always seem to be in the news as much as him. I guess to repair his image, and it's worked, I suppose. In again with that short memory, it's worked in the short, medium, recent years. And he was fated when he played that last test in Sydney against Pakistan recently, as the words were used that he was obviously a legend of the sport and even a role model, and that was sort of something that really got worn pretty thin pretty quickly. So I think we've got a warped sense of what we think about him based on our perceptions, but the
Well, no,
truth
no,
is,
it's not. It's not a warped sense because in the lead up to that final test,
mm,
he got asked at the press conference, "Do you have any regrets over what happened in Cape Town? The
right.
sandpaper incident." He said, "No, I've got no regrets." It's
Hmm.
just like, dude, seriously, you've got no regrets? Like
Yeah.
that for me that spoke volumes of who he is. Actually, he had no regrets. Um, but I mean, he's not the. I don't think he's the brightest light in the chandelier. But anyway, hey, let's move on to something else, Rob.
Yep.
So Aaron Finch's, his sort of international career got curtailed. What was it, about a year or so ago, because he just got out of form. But he's called time on his Big Bash career as well.
Hmm.
And I don't know what that means for Aaron Finch. Whether he'll still, I mean, I know that he played in the Canadian League last year, for example. But yeah, I mean, how does that, I guess as an Australian, I mean, what's your sort of impressions of, Aaron Finch calling, calling stumps basically?
Well, Aaron Finch, given he's from Victoria, where I'm from, he's been a bit of an institution here really for over a decade or more, 17 odd years. I think he's been playing professional cricket, and he's had, as you say, some chances to establish himself and to embed himself in national teams. He's absolutely done that in the one day and T20 teams. The Test team, he had 5 tests only for a brief stint a while ago. Probably couldn't unseat someone like Warner or Kawaja or the previous openers that we had. Couldn't fill that gap that we're trying to fill before Kawaja stepped up the order. So he's been a bit of a stalwart there. He's definitely been a white ball specialist for a long time. But I think he's not just declined, I suppose, as he's aged, as he probably is expected to. But I guess he's the last of those players that's, the now we're in an era of the sport where they're becoming far more athletic than they have in the past. And
Well, you obviously haven't seen the Pakistan wicketkeeper at the moment.
I saw photos of him this morning. He's a bit of a unit, that's for sure. And there are anomalies, but the Pat Cummins and Mitchell Starks and those guys of the world and even like the likes of Jimmy Anderson and Broad, who've been bowling so well for so long, just make you realise you've got to be pretty fit. But Finchie's done really well. He's off into commentary as well. But no doubt he'll be still whacking the white ball around. But much love locally as a Renegades player in the BBL for his whole BBL career. But now there's a smooth transition into commentary is already happening. So we'll look forward to that. But
Well, how many spaces they've got in the commentary box? I mean, it's a bit like that year when Warren McGrath, Damien Martin, they all left in the one season, right? But
yeah, 2007. Yeah,
yeah, I remember the Ashes. I mean, yeah. Anyway,
yeah.
that's going a long way back. But what
Well,
do
just to
you?
add to that, Andy, just quickly, there are now so many outlets now for these ex players to talk, right? So live commentary is one thing, but there's post game analysis, pre game previews, 100 different platforms to talk on. So, and of course now, as you said, the US is opening up. There are different leagues. There's T20 leagues all over the world. So there's maybe enough rotation for these guys to bounce around. But at the same time, every player probably wants to go into media at some point. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, well, some do, some don't. I mean, it's a bit like in football with
Mm,
Jamie Carragher, for example. He's heavily involved in football media, but Steven Gerrard says, I don't want to do it. I want to manage. I want to coach. So it's not for everyone, but yeah, I think in cricketing terms, it's a very easy pathway. And there's also always a recency bias, right? There's always a recency bias. So who's been there recently? But
yep.
it's quite interesting though. I mean, I've listened to a couple of conversations that I've heard, or programs that I've heard with Alistair Cook, and he said my first couple of years on BBC was really tough. I'm commenting on my own teammates. So it's not an easy transition, and yeah. So, well, good luck to Aaron Finch, I guess. Um,
Yep.
Rob, just moving on to something else.
Yep.
So the Australian team has been named. Okay, I appreciate we haven't talked about the BBL at all so far, but the Australian team has been named for the West Indies series, and I guess, a bit of a surprise selection. Well, not a surprise selection. I mean, he was always obviously ever going to. She was always going to be on the side. But Steve Smith has been selected to be an opener, um, and I mean, from where I stand, and obviously I'm not very close to it. I don't I'm not. I have no understanding of what goes on in the Australian dressing room or anything like that. But um, from where I stand, I think it's a brilliant move because what it does is that you put your best player at the top of the order, and then you bring someone else down further in the order, and there's plenty of empirical evidence to say that's actually a really good move. But what stands out for me is that Smith said, "Yes, I will do it." Because so many people don't do it. So Joe Root won't do it. Stephen Fleming, it took him years to do it. So what do you think of the move to have Smith opening?
I think it's really good. There's pros and cons to it. I think it's really good because it brings Cameron Green into the side into a spot where Cameron Green has played his best cricket, right, which is number 4 for WA when he played Shield. And so, and I don't know enough about it, but is it really that different to be opening than being number 3 or 4 when you could be out on the pitch within a half an hour and 20 minutes anyway, right? And Smith is certainly a skillful enough player to be able to handle pretty much any condition. And I totally agree that putting his hand up is an indication that he wants to do it, and he'll live and die by his results. And that's what should happen, I suppose. Um, the 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 opposite issues that are raised that are interesting that have been talked about here are the players now determining where they play in the order? What's the role of a selector or a coach as opposed to the player who are senior enough to say this is the best solution? I don't mind that. I mean, it's obviously not just Steve saying I'm going to do this and everyone else can go to hell. It's more a group discussion with a good captain and coach and selector. But it's interesting that the dynamics of the team are being worked out. And I think having Warner out now upsets the dynamic of the team for a little bit, right? Everyone got pretty settled and it was very successful for the last 12 months, 18 months. And so it'd be interesting to see how it goes. I'm really excited to see what happens. I think it's going to be a great change. And again, having Green in there as a batsman and obviously a towering bowling option is really good. So very exciting time to see what will happen this year.
But it's also kind of interesting, isn't it, that this whole issue of well, it's not really an issue. I mean, unless you want to make it an issue, but Cameron Bancroft being overlooked and Matt Renshaw and Marcus Harris and all of that. But you know, as I see it, you want to get your best players on the field, and that's why I think it's a good move to put Smith up the order, particularly if he wants to do it. I mean, it's not like he's being forced up the order. It's not like someone's coming in behind him and said, "Mate, you can't bat 4 anymore. You've got 1 or nothing."
Yeah.
And I think that's very positive. And so no, I have no problem at all with what they're doing, and I think sometimes you just need to put your best team on the park, and but anyway, we're talking about Test cricket now, and Australia is not that far away from a series against the West Indies, which will be their second series against the West Indies in the space of 2 seasons.
Yes.
I mean, my view on this, Rob, is that I think West Indies are going to get hammered. Do you see it any differently?
I don't think I do. Strangely, I felt that way about Pakistan coming here. I thought they would get completely flogged, and they really held themselves well. I watched pretty much every part of that series, and they were performing admirably, mainly because of their attitude, right? And they're just a couple of sort of obvious tactical moves of getting the right ball in the right time. But the West Indies are another story. They've got a great fast bowler there, I think, but not a lot of other talent that seems to be coming through at the level they're used to. And I think Australia will, under the table or behind closed doors, will consider this a way to test that Steve Smith move without any risk. right? So I think it'll be interesting. What Adelaide and Hobart, I think, are the two tests, and so be a really interesting series. But it's
No,
definitely going to be a bit muted.
I think it's Adelaide and Brisbane, right? I think
As Brisbane, sorry, apologies. Yeah,
Brisbane's white the pink ball test. It's a night
that's
test.
right.
Brisbane, yeah.
Yeah, so it'll be good. But I think West Indies will have a tough time for sure.
Well, I mean,
And
I think when you feel it, when you've got a squad with 8 debutants in it, you're going to be struggling.
well, what do you think
But
about that? Do you think about this idea of them in South Africa having these sort of very new squads, whether they're for poor talent reasons or the pool of T20? What do you think about this dramatic pulling apart of these teams and squads that have happened recently?
how long have you got? No, look, I mean, the South Africa situation is very unfortunate, and actually, it comes down. I mean, I've done a couple of shows previously, and it basically comes down to an administration blunder. Basically, what happened there was, South Africa decided they needed to have this, domestic T20 league, and they signed up basically with outside investors, which we all know are Indian Premier League teams. So they
Mm,
signed them up and said, right, we've got a contract with you guys. And the contract basically says that every single player that's contracted to one of our sides has to be available for all games. And then a few months later, the sort of the program came through for Test cricket, and the acting CEO, and he might have been actually the official CEO at that time. I'm not completely sure, but basically he just accepted it. And then about a couple of days later, when he was having his cornflakes or whatever, he was like, "Oh
yeah,
fuck! Oh my god! I've just fucked up big time. I've got a clash." But like, how have you digest it? It just it was unworkable for South Africa. It was completely unworkable, and they couldn't find a way to sort out a gap, a demarcation between Test cricket and their own domestic league, and it's a very sad time for South African cricket, and so I mean the side that they're going to put out against New Zealand. It's a mess, obviously, but it's only a mess because the administrators made it a mess. That's the only reason it is.
100%.
Whereas the West Indies is very different. West Indies is very different. Guys like Jason Holder are opting out of playing Test cricket at the moment. Um, God knows why. I feel like I should keep swearing, but God knows why. I mean, why would Jason Holder opt out of a tour of Australia? I mean, it makes no sense at all to me. What he said was, I want to make sure I get selected for the T20 World Cup. It's like, well, you're going to get selected anyway.
Yeah,
So I think
100%.
I think like Rob, I feel like we're just seeing a big shift now where players are starting to realise like I don't have to play for 5 days anymore. I'll play for 3 hours. It's much easier.
Yeah, well, as an Australian and talking about the Australian cricket team here and of different formats, it's not something that's ever contemplated here or would be accepted today. But maybe in 12 to 24 months' time, when things shift as they seem to be doing all the time, we might have a new normal. We probably have the depth of people. We've got different squads, right? So the team that went to India, for example, after the World Cup, about a third of them were the best players that we would normally put up, but the rest of the guys did okay. So it's something we would never contemplate here. This sort of hollowing out of a test team for the sake of that. But maybe it's just an inevitability that even the biggest teams like Australia, India, and England will have to face. I hope not, but
Well,
we'll
no, no.
see.
I mean, if you think about England, I mean, they have specialised teams already, right? I mean, um, You
Hmm.
know, like I remember, was it last season or maybe the season before? I mean, they actually had a 1 day series in the middle of a test series, and they just put a whole new team. Um, but I just use the case of Jason Holder. I mean, you know, I mean, I was commentating actually in Dominica last year in July, and you know he was one of their main players, and suddenly he's not available to go to Australia for a Test series, and like
Yeah.
Shea Hope is another example. Shea Hope has been unbelievably good in 1 day cricket, and you know his form probably warranted a place in the Test side, but do you know why he doesn't want to be in the Test side? Because he wants to go to the Dubai League. So you know,
Huh.
it's a very messy situation now. It's so messy, and I think probably a lot of cricket podcasts around the world probably talk about how messy the situation is, and it's not going to get fixed anytime soon because there is no controlling body over cricket in the same way that football is, for example. I mean, I know we can bag FIFA and you know Michelle Platini and scandals and Sepp Blatter and all that, but at least football's got a structure. Cricket's got
Yeah.
no structure whatsoever.
So, who on the West Indian side, for example, can we look forward to seeing out here? Who do you think will do well on Australian pitches and conditions? Is there someone you're looking forward to seeing do well? There's the name that we hear a bit is Shamar Joseph. But what
Uh,
do you like?
I don't. Well, I haven't seen him play, but I have seen Alec Athanas play, and he is high quality. So I watched him in Dominica. So I only watched one of those two tests. So they had the first test in Dominica, the second test in Trinidad. And Alec Athanas was a local guy from Dominica, and he where did he bat? Did he bat five? I think he batted five. I think he now bats four. I think he batted
Mhm.
four in the warm up match the other day in Australia. But he is high quality. I mean, he's got all the shots. He's a he's Lara esque. Um, so I would say look out for Alec Athanas. Beyond that, I'm not really too sure. I think Chandapal was pretty bad against India. I don't know how it would be now. Craig Brathwaite obviously can bat for like 15 days, so
Yeah.
um, so that you can be assured of. But below that, I mean, I think they're going to come in with like two, and I forget their names, but I think they're going to come in with two debutants at 5 and 6, and possibly Kirk McKenzie as well at number 3.
Yep.
So I don't know, mate. I just think West Indies are going to get hammered in this series. That's just my personal opinion.
Okay. Well, we'll see how it goes. I mean, look, I'm obviously hopeful for two Aussie big wins, but you want competitive games that are fun to watch as well. So fingers crossed for that. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, the West Indies have actually got some decent bowlers. I mean, like, so Kemar Roach will be spearheading the attack. But to be honest, the last time I saw him bowl was again in Dominica. So this is back in July. Okay, so they haven't really played. Well, I don't think they've played any Test cricket since then. But he just looked old. He looked tired. He didn't threaten, and it was actually quite interesting. I was on commentary with Curtly Ambrose at the time, Sir Curtly, and
Yes.
and he said to me, he said, "Look, the issue is that they're bowling on crap pitches. I mean,
Yeah.
how's he supposed to do anything on this wicket?" He said it's just rubbish. So as you alluded to before, Rob, what we saw from Pakistan during the series that's just finished is that if you get on decent wickets that actually do something, it actually does something for the bowlers. But that doesn't mean to say I think that the West Indies are going to roll Australia. I don't think that at all. But at least it makes it a bit more of a fair contest, between you know guys that can bowl pace bowling or swing or seam or whatever. At least they've got an equal chance.
Yeah, absolutely. And Adelaide and Brisbane much bit more balanced now, offering bowlers and batsmen equal conditions, I think, than they used to be. I mean, Adelaide used to be a flat track for batsmen. Brisbane was always about the green top on the first day back in the day. Now I think they've got more balanced in that regard. So hopefully both teams will have a good chance. And winning the toss, I suppose, in those two pitches isn't as critical as other places in Australia. But I think of course West Indies would love to win the toss and make the right decision and get out there and try it. So we'll see how it goes. And that brings after that series, it brings to an end a pretty busy 12 months for the Australian team and a big year ahead. As we mentioned, the World Cup coming up, T20 World Cup, tons of white ball series here and there against England and I think South Africa again and others, and then obviously another summer next at the end of the year. So the series for Australian teams just keep rolling on. We haven't even talked about women's cricket either, and that's obviously been a busy time for them. So
Yeah, I know.
um,
I saw. Was it Alyssa Healy got to like 300 matches or something the other day? Like it's kind of astonishing, really. Um,
yeah,
but I just want to pick up on one thing that you said, Rob,
yep.
is that it has been an amazing year for Australian cricket, and I just want to throw this out there. Do you
Mm.
think that Tim Paine's indiscretion has actually been the best thing that ever happened for Australian cricket in recent times?
I think so. Weirdly, I think Sandpaper Gate wasn't too far off it as well because it exposed a whole bunch of cultural issues. Tim Payne took over and did a really good job at kind of just being the adult in the room, I think, for a while, and then this sort of this forcing function of transitioning to Paddy Cummins has proven to be a masterstroke in hindsight. So I think it's worked out well for the team, and the team's had a massive year. I think we've won everything except for one or two things. So um, long may it continue, of course, Andy, as you
No,
would
I
no doubt say
look,
as a Kiwi.
no. I know that's sort of slightly tongue in cheek. I know that. I mean, well, cock and cheek maybe, but but what I mean to say is that and I'm not saying Tim Payne got handled fairly by any stretch of the imagination. I
Mm,
feel like it was very unfair, but it's just funny how things work out when you have a change of captaincy. And bearing in mind at that stage, Tim Payne was just the captain of the Test side, and since then, Pat Cummins has taken over all the teams. And look
yep.
what happened since they've had one captain captaining all the sides. And I don't know how many other sides around the world are doing it. I mean, Sri Lanka's got about four captains at the moment. New, New Zealand's got a changing captain every day, but Australia has a consistent captain. It's Pat Cummins in every format, and I don't think it's any surprise that Australia's had that much success because they've got leadership in their team.
No, you're right. I think even the same for the coaching staff as well. And there's, you're stretching people's capacity to handle a load, but the culture becomes consistent from the top down across the organisation, right across the teams, as you say. And the World Cup win, for example, was a great counterpoint to grinding out an Ashes, retention. This idea that you can handle any situation. We can have the same person making good quality decisions in different formats and different scenarios. That's a huge bonus. And so I think we want to embrace that. It creates stability, it creates sort of knowing what the future will hold. You can predict a bit more about what we'll be doing in the future, and that's really powerful. And the bowling quartet, for example, for Australia is I think the most successful ever, and hopefully that'll be another 4 or 5 years of that. I don't think it will be, but there's no reason why that quartet can't go on, body and health willing. So
Well, no, it's not,
to,
and I think Rob, you didn't mention it directly, but indirectly you did mention it. It's a bit
mhm.
like I looked at the because I one of the things that I'm passionate about is English cricket, right? Because I lived there for 13 years. And I looked at what happened at the World Cup, and my first question was, well, why have you got split coaches? What's the reason for that? And then I looked at, well, who made the semi-finals? The, so three of the four teams that made the semi-finals of the World Cup was New Zealand, Australia, and India, they all have one coach. South Africa had split coaching. So they were the only outlier.
Yeah.
And England's got this whole thing of having split coaching, and I don't know. Like I just feel that Australia with under Andrew McDonald and Pat Cummins have just nailed it. And so like I'm super impressed by the way that they've performed over this year. And I must say that as much as I don't like Aussies, I I really do like the way Pat Cummins conducts himself. I think he's next level. Um, but anyway, Rob, I think that's time to wind up for today. And I'm sure we'll look forward to another excellent chat next week here on the Aussie Cricket Show. Thank you very much for joining me, mate. And so from me and Rob, we're signing off here on Global Radio. That was the